Welcome to Electric Focus. And one of the common fears I get when I'm talking to people about switching to electric vehicles is traveling on a long journey. What's it like? Is it a complete disaster? Well, let's look at a real life example. So when it comes to a long journey in an electric car, it is different from having a petrol or diesel car. A couple of things: you really have to plan beforehand and think about the route you're going to take. You also have to take into account you are going to stop for longer than you would for petrol. However, if you're doing a really long journey, and I'm going to give an example in a minute, which is a journey I did from Scotland to Norwich, which was just over 400 miles. When you're doing that sort of journey, you're going to have to stop anyway, for just a natural break. And it's good to stop anyway and not be driving too long. So certainly you're going to stop. The only difference is you need to be thinking about where you're going to charge. Okay, so let's look at this journey I did. So as I said, down from Scotland to Norwich, just over 400 miles. And before I set off, I did a bit of planning, and that's what I'd always recommend you do with driving an EV. You just have to sit down and just do a bit of planning beforehand. It doesn't take too long, and there's some really good tools to help you. There's ZapMap, which has got a good route planner on it. Check that out, and I've done a video on ZapMap actually. There's also a Better Route Planner, which is a very good app, and I'd actually say it's probably the best route planner, and as its name suggests, so have a look at that too. So a bit of planning involved. Once you've done that though, it's just on the road as normal, and you know now the stops you're looking to stop on, and normally I have a few backups as well just in case there's any problems. So the first major stop I had was at Gretna Green services, and there are 4 350 kilowatt chargers there, Ionity branded. There's also a couple of 50 kilowatts grid serves near the services and some Tesla superchargers as well. So I wanted to use the Ionity chargers because they're the best for my car. My car charges up to 104 kilowatts, the Jaguar I-Pace, and they charge up to 350 kilowatts. So I might as well take advantage of getting the maximum I can for my car. Anyway, I got there and all 4 chargers were in use. So first of all, I'm thinking, okay, there's that little bit of anxiety where you think, God, I've got this long journey and now I've got to wait for a charge, and you know you're going to have to charge for a certain amount of time. So I just parked up, and one of the guys who was in a Tesla Model 3 just gestured to me that he had 2 minutes left. So it wasn't a massive wait, and I could plug straight in as soon as he'd finished. And then I sat on the charger for a bit, called up some emails, as you do generally when you're charging, and went into the services to get a coffee and a croissant. And by the time I'd come back to my car, I sat in the car and realised I was actually nearly where I'd set out to be, around the sort of 85% mark before I wanted to leave. Now, I've done a video on this, but there's always not much point really charging much beyond 80%, because as soon as you hit that 80% mark, your battery starts to slow down the amount of power it's taking in. So that 80 to 100% takes a very long time. So you might as well just move on to your next destination. And the route planner I talked about, a Better Route Planner, takes that into account and tells you where it thinks you should stop charging. So I just kind of followed that. But as with any charging you do, sometimes you sort of charge a bit over because you forget, or you're just there a bit longer, and if there's nobody else there, you might just put a little bit more in before you go off. So I left just over 85%, got on the road. I actually drove the wrong way, right? I was just thinking about talking about this in a video, and I drove the wrong way up the M6 and had to come back down again. So that lost me about 5 minutes. But by the time I got to Scotch Corner, I was ready to stop anyway. So Scotch Corner had 2 GridServe 60 kilowatt chargers. It also has Tesla chargers there as well. So if you've got a Tesla, fantastic, 8 of them there. But only 2 GridServe 50 kilowatts. So it was a bit of a, 60 kilowatts there, I think. There was a bit of a worry there when I got there, thinking, are they both going to be in use? Luckily, one of them was free. So I plugged into one of them. It started up the process, and I thought, right, I'll leave it doing that, and I'll go in because I wanted to get some bits from M&S there for lunch. So I went straight into the services, got some bits from M&S, got a coffee, got back to the car. And when I got to the charger said error on it. Now, That's a bit of a learning for me there, and a tip for you is don't leave the charger until you see it's actually started charging. I just was watching it, doing its startup, and didn't bother to stay for seeing that it was actually charging. So I've learned from that. I won't do that again. So I restarted it, and it went through the process, and it actually did start again. So it just seemed to be some glitch, and you do get these glitches now and again. Sometimes it's just a phone call to the provider to get your charger reset, and you can start charging again. I was back on the road again and heading down the road, and my next stop was at Retford services. Now there's quite a few chargers around that area. It was saying to charge on the northbound side for some reason actually, which meant you had to go over to the other side and charge on some Shell 175 kilowatt chargers there. But there was also a couple of Instavolts on the south side. Got there, they were both free. So I plugged into one of those, started straight away, no problems at all. Instavolt, very, very easy to use. And I was charging at a pretty good speed. Now, why was I getting a good speed? What was different to the other chargers? Because I didn't mention that on the other chargers. Well, the reason for that is that the weather was warm, my battery had warmed up well, so I was in the perfect conditions, around 70 degrees at the time for charging. That is the perfect charging condition. So I got my sort of maximum speed really when I started charging there. While I was waiting there, somebody else came up to the other charger and plugged in there, and he had just bought a brand new car actually. It was one of the new Mercedes EQEs, I think they are. So I had a chat to him, just as you tend to, at chargers, because you've got a bit more time. It's much more of a social event when you're charging, you'll find. And he was just telling me about his car. Then he went to plug in, and I noticed he was having some problems. I went over to help, and he said that his cards wasn't accepting, and we tried a couple of other cards. I thought it might be just he got the wrong card, but actually it wasn't working. So the card reader wasn't working on any card, so that was a bit frustrating. He could have phoned Instavolt, but he said he was probably going to go on to somewhere else. But I did mention to him that over the other side of the motorway were those 3 Shell chargers, and you could go and use those. I'm sure there'd be one available there. So he went off, and I explained it to another person who was actually just turned up and was waiting. That was the same problem, and helped him, and he went off to charge elsewhere as well. So that's a reality. That happened, and that was frustrating for that driver. But there's usually somewhere else you can go to. But that does happen. For me, it was fine. I got charged and back on the road quite quickly because it was a perfect ideal temperature, as I said. And then I drove all the way to the rest of the journey, which was Norwich. And in fact, it was the traffic that actually held me up quite a bit towards the end. So that was a journey. It's not perfect. Things go wrong. This is new technology. If you can live with that, it wasn't a disaster, and it never is a disaster. It's sometimes a bit frustrating, that's all, as with lots of new things. But it is the future, and this is just giving you an understanding of what it can be like today. And the infrastructure is getting better and better all the time. More and more chargers come down. Yes, more and more cars are out there, but I'm confident that the infrastructure will keep up with demand, and it will just get better and better and better and easier as we go into the future. So an exciting future. I hope that was useful. Please like and subscribe as normal, and I'll speak to you soon.